voluntarily. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Dine. Our hearing today is a public part of your legislative process. This is your opportunity to express your position on the proposed legislation before us today. We do ask that you limit handouts. If you are unable to attend a public hearing and you would like your position stated for the record, you may submit your position and any comments using the legislative's website by 12 p.m. the day prior to the hearing. Letters emailed to a senator or staff member will not be part of the permanent record. If you are unable to attend and testify at a public hearing due to a disability, you may use the Nebraska Legislature's website to submit testimony, written testimony in lieu of in-person testimony. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you follow the following procedures. Please turn off cell phones and other electronic devices. The ordered testimony is introducer, proponents, opponents, neutrals, and closing remarks. If you will be testifying, please complete the green form and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you have written materials that you would like to distribute to the committee, please hand them to the page to distribute. We need 11 copies for all committee members and staff. If you need additional copies, please ask the page to make copies for you. When you begin to testify, please state and spell your name for the record. Please be concise. How many people are going to testify on this first bill? Okay, we'll go 5 minutes, but stay in the 5 minutes. Green for 4, you have a green light for 4, and then a yellow light, you should be wrapping up. If there are many wishes, okay, covered that. Your remarks were reflected, if your remarks were reflected in previous testimony, or you would like your position to be known, but do not wish to testify, please sign the white form at the back of the room, and it will be included in the official record. Please speak directly into the microphone so that our transcribers can hear your testimony clearly. I'd like to introduce committee staff. To my immediate right is legal counsel, Lyle Wheeler. To my immediate left is research analyst, Charles Hamilton. And to my left, at the end of the table, is committee clerk, Thomas Weekly. Now I would like the committee members to introduce themselves, starting at my far right.
I'm Senator Dave Merman from Glenville, District 38, to represent 8 counties along the southern border in the middle part of the state.
Elliot Bostar, District 29.
Brad Von Gillern, District 4.
Senator Joni Albright, District 17, Wayne, Thurston, Dakota, and a portion of Dixon County in northeast Nebraska. Welcome.
George Dungden, LD 26, Northeast Lincoln.
If our page, just one page. Oh, no, our pages could stand up. This afternoon, we have Amelia, who is at UNL studying political science, and Caitlin, who is at UNL, also a junior, also studying political science. Please remember that senators may come and go during our hearing as they may have bills to introduce in other committees. Refrain from applause or other indications of support or opposition. For our audience, the microphones in the room are not for amplification, but for recording purposes only. Lastly, we use electronic devices to distribute information. Therefore, you may see committee members referencing information on their electronic devices. Be assured that your presence here today and your testimony are important to us and is a critical part of our state government. With that, we'll open on LB 318. Welcome, Senator Bostar.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Chair Linehan and fellow members of the Revenue Committee. For the record, my name is Elliot Bostar, that's ELIOTBOSTAR, and I represent Legislative District 29. I'm here today to present LB 318, a bill that establishes the Child Care Tax Credit and reauthorizes the School Readiness Tax Credit. Affordable and accessible child care options are essential to Nebraska's families and our economy. Without adequate child care options, working parents are unable to participate fully in the labor market, support their households, or spend their earnings in their community. Children miss out on important child development opportunities. Employers face losses as they struggle to find workers. Lack of adequate, affordable child care is an acute problem in Nebraska. The most recent data from the Bipartisan Policy Center shows there are over 20,000 children in Nebraska who do not have access to care. This problem requires a two-pronged solution, one that directly assists parents and one that directly assists caregivers. It's important to recognize how we currently fund child care in Nebraska, through fees or tuition. Parents pay the vast majority of the cost to run a child care facility. There are inherent constraints and limitations in this industry. For health, safety, and educational attainment reasons, we can only have so many kids per child care worker. To accept more children into a facility, the facility must hire more workers and possibly expand the physical space of their facility. They must purchase more food and supplies for the children in their care. We all know that the cost of rent, labor, and food has gone up significantly, causing the cost of childcare to increase as well. Meanwhile, due to the same cost increases, the budgets of families get squeezed tighter. And families start to wonder if it simply makes more financial sense for one parent to stay home instead of work. Think about that. The cost of childcare is so high right now that it often makes more financial sense for one parent to simply leave the workforce. Forcing workers out of the workforce is the opposite of what we need to be doing in Nebraska, where we already have a labor shortage. And we can't forget single parents who don't even have that as an option. In Nebraska, it is estimated that single parents spend 54% of their income on childcare. While inflation has certainly made this problem worse, lack of adequate childcare is a problem that has existed for years. This problem is not occurring because our childcare providers are price gouging families. It's quite the opposite. Childcare providers charge parents just enough to cover their cost of service. Childcare workers are some of the lowest paid employees in our state. The poverty rate for early educators in Nebraska is 29.2%, much higher than Nebraska workers in general, which is 10.1%. And it's 11.2 times as high as for K through 8 teachers, which is 2.6%. Not only is the pay inadequate, but the work is physically and mentally exhausting, making a career in this industry difficult and unattractive. As a result, we have seen increasing numbers of people leave this field, forcing remaining child care operators to further limit the number of children they accept or simply close their programs altogether. The Nebraska Department of Labor reports that at least 40% of the workforce has been in the field for less than a year. This high turnover rate means that children are not receiving consistent care from the same providers, which can cause stress and complications for both the children and parents. Rural Nebraska in particular has been impacted, experiencing a 12.2% drop in family child care home providers since 2019. Unless we start to truly invest in our state's child care industry through legislation such as LB 318, we will continue to see Nebraska's young families leave for better opportunities. LB 318 was designed to ensure parents stay in the driver's seat when it comes to their kids, while supporting a critical private industry that faces inherent constraints in their business model. It does so in 3 ways. First, the bill offers a tiered refundable tax credit for parents with children in childcare. Second, the bill incentivizes the private industry by offering a tiered non-refundable tax credit to individuals, companies, or other tax-paying entities who make a financial contribution to increase the availability of quality childcare options in our state. Finally, the bill reauthorizes the School Readiness Tax Credit Program, a refundable and non-refundable tax credit to support our childcare employees and providers. This legislation addresses the industry's 3 biggest concerns: accessibility, affordability, and sustainability. LB 318 encourages private entities to invest in the childcare industry, increasing capacity in areas that need it the most. It also provides financial support to childcare employees and providers, incentivizing them to remain in this crucial field. Finally, it helps working parents afford the cost of care, thus sustaining an industry that relies heavily on parent fees just to break even. Those who will testify after me will expand more fully on the context and individual components of the legislation. With that, I thank you for your time, and I encourage you to support LB 318. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there questions from the committee? How did you come up with the refundable tax credit on 1,000 to 5,000 and household income? What benchmarks did you use for household income?
To the child care tax credit provision?
Or maybe there is none. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, so is the tax credit on the first one, is that, there is no income limit? I'm sorry.
So the refundable tax credit, there is income limits.
Okay,
So it's And that changes how much tax credit is valued at. So at under $75,000 of household income, it's $5,000 per child. Between 75 and 150, it's 3,000 per child, and 150 to 200,000, it's 1,000 per child. So I guess you could say the cap is 200,000 for household income.
Thank you. And I didn't ask the question accurately. How did you choose the income levels? Are they based on, like you see a lot of things that say 200% of poverty or 300% of poverty or
Yeah.
300% of the average wage, or so was there a?
On that note, actually, so we worked with providers to determine these,
Okay,
but on that front too, there is at the 100% of poverty level, there is a tax credit that you're eligible for that functions as a child tax credit. So if you're at the poverty line or below, you can receive the refundable tax credit regardless of your child care expenses.
okay,
So even if, for example, you're a family that is, you have a parent that stays home with their kid, and you're at the poverty level, you can claim the tax credit regardless.
and that's both federal and state? Or
As far
state?
as the poverty line,
For that credit that you just described, yes.
well, it's refundable. So yeah, I mean, the state would be granting you, it could be used to offset your state income taxes.
Okay.
But if your state income taxes were below that, which they certainly would be if you were at 100%
Then
of
you
the
get a
poverty
refund
level,
credit.
then
It's
yes,
like an earned income tax credit.
you would get support just from the state.
Okay, perfect. Other questions from the committee? Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairwoman Linehan. Thank you, Senator Bostar, for bringing this. What is the federal poverty level? It varies.
So I believe for a family of four, and this will be verified by the individuals who will testify behind me, but I believe it's $27,000 for a family of four would be the 100% of the federal poverty. Did that answer your question?
And to qualify for the refundable income tax credit, total household income is less than or equal to 100% of the federal poverty.
That's one of the ways you can qualify for the tax credit. So again, if you're at the poverty line, you can get it regardless of your expenditures and childcare.
That isn't over there. I see that now. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Senator Von Gillen.
Yes, Senator Bostar, I think the three parts you explained, the child care tax credit is for the benefit of the parents and the families. Then the third part, the school readiness tax credit benefits employees that are providing childcare. The one in between, does that benefit daycare provider companies or companies that provide daycare for their employees?
It's a mechanism to have private industry make investments in childcare. And so if anyone essentially, if a tax-paying entity were to make these kind of contributions to support or expand and improve access to childcare options, they would be eligible for the tax credit.
Okay, so that tax credit would accrue to the business that is improving access
Sure.
to childcare for maybe their employees?
It's a way to incentivize,
Okay,
where it's needed, and that the amount of the credit changes depending on the circumstances of the support for the child care.
okay,
But yes, it's a mechanism to try to bring in private money to support child care systems.
okay. And then I think that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillen. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, you'll be here to close, right?
I will, yes. Thank you.
So, proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chair Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee, thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Elizabeth Everett, Elizabeth, Everett, and I'm the Deputy Director of First Five Nebraska, a statewide public policy organization focused on promoting the care, education, and well-being of Nebraska's youngest children. I am here today to testify in support of LB 318 and would like to thank Senator Bostar for his leadership in championing this important bill. Now more than ever, we know how heavily our state relies upon high-quality, affordable, and accessible childcare. Working parents depend on it for the financial stability of their families. Employers depend upon it so workers can be fully engaged and productive at their jobs. Our state as a whole depends upon it to ensure our economic vitality and quality of life. But the demand for childcare throughout Nebraska is rapidly outpacing the supply. 75% of Nebraska's children under age 6 have all available parents in the labor force. We rank 6th in the nation for children under age 6 who are being raised by a single mother who participates in the labor force. For these families, childcare is not an option. It is a necessity. Despite the demand, the availability of childcare in all parts of the states is getting worse. Compared to 2019, there are 10% fewer childcare programs serving children ages 0 to 5 in Nebraska. This is particularly true of our family childcare home providers, who make up nearly 70% of all licensed programs serving children between below school age. Since 2019, these providers have decreased by 12.2% in greater Nebraska and by 13.7% in metropolitan areas. Why is the gap between supply and demand in childcare growing? Childcare offers neither financial stability nor an easy career path, whether you own a program or work for one. Delivering reliable, developmentally appropriate childcare services is extremely costly. Most childcare programs operate on extremely thin margins, while childcare workers earn less than half the statewide median earnings for all occupations. As a result, a growing number of early childhood professionals are seeking employment opportunities elsewhere. With a 40% turnover rate among childcare workers, programs of all sizes are struggling to stay fully staffed, and time that should be spent providing quality care to children is relegated to hiring and training. The difficulties facing providers also means that parents work harder than ever to find affordable, reliable childcare. I can personally attest to this. Despite the relatively availability of childcare in Lincoln, my husband and I could not find an open slot in a quality program until 8 months after my daughter was born in 2021. With a second on the way this spring, we are facing the same challenges while bracing for the enormous impact this will have on our household finances. Even with secure jobs and resources, we find it far from easy to navigate this challenge. Far too many other Nebraskan parents are much less fortunate. On its own, LB 318 cannot fix Nebraska's broken childcare system, but it does move us in the right direction by addressing 3 main concerns. The first is the financial burden on parents raising young children. The bill offers a refundable tax credit to parents and guardians with 1 or more child being cared for by a licensed provider or license-exempt provider who participates in the childcare subsidy. The amount of the credit varies according to the family's household income. Second, the bill addresses the financial burdens on providers by offering a non-refundable tax credit to encourage private sector investment. The non-refundable tax credit would be available to any individual or employer who makes a qualifying contribution to strengthen childcare options. This includes establishing new programs, helping with the operating expenses of existing programs, or funding professional development opportunities for childcare staff. Qualifying contributions must be monetary, and the size of the non-refundable credit varies according to the nature of the contribution and locations it benefits. Finally, LB 318 reauthorizes the school readiness tax credit, which offers a tiered refundable credit to eligible childcare professionals and a tiered non-refundable credit to eligible childcare businesses, especially those serving children through the childcare subsidy. The overall goal of these credits is to make it easier for more programs to keep their doors open and help early childhood professionals remain engaged in this critical area of our statewide workforce. You may have heard the saying that everyone depends upon someone who depends upon childcare. This is especially true in Nebraska, where working parents are critical to a dynamic labor force, a business-friendly environment, and a thriving economy. In a larger sense, this bill also addresses the quality of life that Nebraska's children and families deserve. Nebraska's public and private sectors have a common stake in fixing Nebraska's broken, severely underfunded childcare system. LB 318 is a meaningful step in that direction. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. Are there questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Dunn.
Thank you, Chair Linehan, and thank you for being here today. I appreciate your testimony, both personal story as well as the professional sort of aspect of that. One thing that struck me in your testimony was the conversation you had briefly about the decrease in providers in both metropolitan areas as well as greater Nebraska. We hear a lot in the legislature about urban versus rural issues. This seems to me like something that would be an issue statewide. Can you speak a little bit more to some of the challenges that you're aware of with regards to greater Nebraska and more rural areas and childcare? It's an issue that affects them as well, correct?
It is, yes. Childcare capacity across our state is a huge issue right now. As Senator Bostar mentioned, we have right now around 20,000 children who do not have any access to licensed childcare programs, which means that if the parent did want to go into work, there would be no available slot right now for them. We've seen a huge decrease, especially in family home providers, which rural communities especially rely upon. Especially since COVID has happened, a lot of family home providers in rural Nebraska had to shut down because they weren't able to financially meet their needs. Child care centers as well, we've seen a decrease in those numbers. I actually have a graph that I can share with the committee that shows specifically the amount of programs that have decreased, both family and child care centers in urban and rural settings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Diane. Are there other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Are there other proponents?
Apologies, I'm spelling things all over the place.
Good afternoon, Chairman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Andrew Dunkley, Andrew Dunkley, and I'm with the Nebraska Farm Bureau. I'm also testifying today on behalf of the Nebraska cattlemen and the Nebraska pork producers. So Senator, Senator Duncan, I appreciate your question because I hope to be able to address some of the concerns that rural Nebraska has. This is a really big issue that has really come into our radar in the last couple of years, specifically. The impact that the lack of childcare has had on rural Nebraska is really devastating, and it's hurting rural economic development opportunities throughout the state. And the lack of viable childcare is definitely discussed. When I go out to meet with county farm bureaus, and I talk about opportunities and in these communities that support our farmers and ranchers. We hear, yes, we need rural workforce housing. We need programs. There are things that we need, but we can't attract people to come and live and work in these small towns at half the time because they don't have viable childcare. It's been a driver of many issues facing the childcare industry. Workforce has been when there's an when you're making $11 an hour and you're a childcare professional. Why work as a childcare professional when you can go to McDonald's and make a couple bucks more an hour or somewhere else? Nebraska has the lowest unemployment in the nation, and people have options. So we believe that LB 318 provides incentives for employers to deliver more options for that workforce and some tax incentives for parents, tax incentives for people who work in the industry and that they can stay in that industry and recruit good people to the industry. And we support the bills for that issue. This was first brought to us by one of our regional managers who serves on a board of a childcare facility in Eustis, Nebraska. They serve, I believe, about 55 children in that facility. And they actually recently had to move to a system where they created a lottery, and whoever was chosen from that lottery had to keep their kids home that day because otherwise they had too many kids and could not provide for them. When they were granted ARPA dollars, they would have loved to have hired more people to be able to
watch more kids, but they couldn't do that. They wanted to upgrade their facilities, but they had to hire more people in order to facilitate the need in that small community. We're seeing similar situations throughout the state like that, and in areas that aren't fortunate enough to have a facility like Eustis. And so the other thing that we're looking at is some of these issues are regulatory, and there are fixes to those. A big one is background checks, and we're thankful that in the governor's budget he upped the budget for background checks that will increase the time that child care workers can get their background check done. Possibly sooner than 4 weeks, so they're not waiting for 4 weeks. We're hopeful that will improve, but in the meantime, finding a way to incent how this industry this industry workforce is supported throughout the state and rural communities is really important. With that, I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunkley. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you much for being here.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Tom Benzer, Tombenzor. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Catholic Conference, which advocates for the public policy interests of the Catholic Church and advances the gospel of life through engaging, educating, and empowering public officials, Catholic laity, and the general public. I'm here to express the conference's support for Section 3(1)C of LB 318 that provides a tax credit for adults who are raising dependent children. So, as the conference considers these, types of details of tax policies that have a positive impact on the family, we, certainly encourage the committee to seriously consider proposals like the child tax credit portion in LB 318. When cultural, political, and economic trends negatively affect marriage and family life, it is crucial to consider how public policy might better support these irreplaceable social institutions. For us, Catholic social teaching recognizes that every society that intends to serve the good of man must not overlook the centrality and social responsibility of the family. In the relationship to the family, society and the state are seriously obligated to observe the principle of subsidiarity, which means that public authorities may not take away from the family tasks which it can accomplish well by itself or in free association with other families, but these same authorities, like the state, have the duty to sustain the family, ensuring that it has all the assistance that it needs to fulfill properly its responsibilities. So we believe here that, empowering mothers and fathers to better live out their obligations to each other, their children, and their communities is among one of the most worthy goals that public policy can help realize. And we think that this tax credit eases some of the burden of raising children, especially in larger families. And this is one strategy, I think, at getting that done. So to that end, the conference supports the child tax credit portion of LB 318, and appreciate your time today, and thanks for your consideration, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benzer. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Don't be shy, proponents. You can move up front. We got plenty of room.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Chair Linehan, members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Diane Timmy Stinton, DianeTemmestinton. I am the owner and chief executive officer of TMCO based in Lincoln. I'm here today on behalf of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, the Columbus Chamber of Commerce, and the nearly 300 members of the Nebraska Economic Developers Association in support of the LB 318. TMCO is a contract metal manufacturing company founded in 1974. We're a second generation small family business with a sales revenue of about $50 million and 230 employees. In visiting companies in the United States and around the world, I can attest that our competitive advantage is our workforce. Nebraska has an unparalleled work ethic and pride in labor that's worth its weight in gold. The insufficient childcare infrastructure threatens this advantage. The increasing cost and lack of available childcare are real concerns that have caused people to leave the workforce. And this is at a time when unemployment is at historic lows. In a recent survey, labor ranks as the top challenges businesses across the state face. And on the other hand, childcare ranks as one of the biggest areas of opportunities for business to attract and retain a workforce. Also, just in company surveys that we've done, the concerns of affordable housing and affordable childcare consistently rank 1 and 2 in terms of employees' concerns as well. Innovative solutions are needed in cooperation by public and private sectors to address this problem, and this is why I'm here to support LB 318. It is designed to support working parents and childcare providers by offering this tiered refundable tax credit for parents, by offering the tiered non-refundable tax credit to individuals, companies or other taxpaying entities who make financial contributions to increase the availability of quality childcare options, and finally, it reauthorizes the school readiness tax credit program, a refundable and non-refundable tax credit to support our childcare employees and providers. As a business owner who's been engaged with this issue now for the past few years, it's apparent that the childcare system is really broken and that childcare does not follow the traditional economics of for-profit businesses, which really boggles my mind as a business owner. Childcare providers are operating on razor-thin margins with some of the lowest paid employees, often without benefits. My conversations with providers about the sustainability of their business model and attracting and retaining their talent really raises grave concerns for the future, especially as childcare is critical to workforce participation. This is a statewide issue, which is key to building our workforce and being an attractive option for people considering a move to Nebraska. TMCO is committed to supporting our employees and their families through innovative programming. We are currently in partnership with a high-quality childcare provider, and we offer early enrollment and subsidized tuition to our families to help them with the availability and affordability. In the near future, we have plans to offer financial support for all children aged 0 to 5 to support the young parents who work for us. We are not only helping to form the solutions, but we are actively fighting to keep our employees. Businesses across the state are fighting to keep their employees and keep their people employed. And the support of Nebraska families and our critical child care providers through LB 318 is one way in which the public sector can help us in this fight. Investment in childcare infrastructure will mean better opportunities for economic growth and more income for working families. Data clearly shows that investment in early childhood education creates tremendous societal returns on investment as it impacts educational attainment, employment, health, and criminality. It also has the potential to address equity in our communities, as quality opportunities for care can be extended to more children and the families that need them. The burden of childcare and those forced to make a decision between care and employment are also disproportionately women. This threatens to worsen gender inequalities, wage gaps, and opportunities for women in the workplace, not to mention exacerbate the higher rates of poverty experienced by women. So in consideration, I think it's necessary to look hard and deep of what the future could be, and consider that research shows that a rising number of adults in the U.S. are unlikely to have children because of the cost. And we're also seeing challenges in countries with a low birth rate problem because they're not incented to have children. So this could have drastic effects on the labor and economy, and we're in a position to address this problem proactively. LB 318 is a step in the right direction. So I'd just like to reiterate that Nebraska has an unparalleled work ethic and pride in labor that's really worth its weight in gold. We need the support to attract and retain it. It's in everyone's interest to help out our hardworking families and the providers who make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the committee? Senator Dunn.
Thank you again, Chair Minahan, and thank you for your testimony. One of the things that we've heard, I think, from both yourself and some of the other testifiers that I wanted maybe you to expand upon a little bit to make sure I kind of understand how these three different prongs interplay. We've talked a lot about workforce and workforce increases in the workforce and benefits to the workforce. My understanding of this bill, like I said, is there's three separate prongs essentially, or components that we're talking about. Do you think that each of those three different prongs will benefit workforce? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think through my testimony, I hope to show that, there's brittleness in the system. And I think that, we're built on a stack of cards. If the providers fall, then the businesses fall. So, that prong needs to be strengthened. A direct prong for parents to be able to support their families and children. Absolutely. And then for businesses to create the incentives to also invest into this infrastructure, I think is also critical. So it really is strengthening all of those prongs that I think is going to lead to a productive solution.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator Merman.
Yes, thanks a lot for testifying. I'm not familiar with your business, but I appreciate you working with the families that work for you for childcare for their kids. Is there any families that are able to bring their children to work with them? I mean, do you allow that, or is it even possible? Like I said, I don't know your business. But...
Yeah, we're a heavy manufacturing company. We have a lot of sharp objects.
Yeah. And then my next question is, the child care providers that you support, they're not near the business? Or I mean, what I'm thinking is, can parents visit their kids like when they have their breaks?
Yeah, they are located. So the childcare provider that we intentionally partner with is located about half a mile from our business. It's intentionally very close, and we encourage parents also to take time out to volunteer and be active in their child's classroom as well. So, yeah,
Great.
Unfortunately, as a small business, I mean, there's not a lot that we can do in terms of investment into building our own childcare, for example, just because of the prohibitive costs and the regulations. But
Sure.
Yeah.
And I assume to get the credit for or the support for childcare, they have to be full-time. The employees have to be
Yes.
full-time.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Are there other questions from the committee? Could you just go again through your opening? I didn't catch how you spell your last name, and I didn't catch for sure who you all represent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's
So my last name is Stinton, Stinton. And I'm representing the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, Columbus Chamber of Commerce, and the Nebraska Economic Developers Association.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for being here. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Majie Miller Jenkins, Maghiemiller, hyphenated Jenkins. I'm here just as an average citizen to kind of give you a real life beat on what this would look like for an average person to be able to receive something like this and how that would play into a household like mine. I do mutual aid, so I work with teens, youth, and young adults. So I would see exactly how this would be able to benefit a lot of the people that I work with. A lot of my youth are telling me that they don't want to grow up and have kids because they see the struggle that all of the parents are going through right now. With inflation going up, the cost of groceries is astronomical. A lot of my youth are looking at how expensive it would be to move out as a young person with an average job, with an average paycheck, and with them just on their own, seeing how much it would be to pay rent and groceries and a car payment. They don't see a world in which being able to have children is feasible because they couldn't afford it. They can't afford to be able to pay for anything on their own now. So adding a whole nother person to their life is unconscionable at this point. So for something like this, to be able to give a family the opportunity to have a job that would support you having childcare, because a few of my teens already do have children. So them attempting to be a part of the workforce is awful. I provide free childcare with what I do, or I barter. So some people come in, like they clean my house, or we'll exchange a meal for, I'll keep their kid for a few hours, and when they get done with work, they'll go home and cook dinner and bring me over a plate. And that's what we do for exchange, because that's how I operate. I focus on not the dollars, but the dollars do add up and they do make a difference inside of everybody's life. And having a job that would have an incentive to be able to pay for you to have your child in childcare, no judgment, but from the looks of the age range of the people I'm talking to today, I'm assuming that you don't have small children that are in childcare. But for me, I have a girl that I watch her, she's 18 months old, and for her mom to put her in childcare, it would cost her approximately $2,000 a month. A month. For a woman that works at Taco Bell, she makes $14 an hour. She also has to pay rent. She also has to pay a car payment. She has to buy the baby's food. She's not on state assistance. She doesn't get any other forms of assistance from anybody else. And so if I didn't watch her child for her for free, she wouldn't be able to afford to now. She couldn't pay to work. Poverty is expensive. Poverty is extremely expensive. It's hard being poor because everything that seems like it shouldn't cost that much costs so much more. I used to be able to get an oil change for $20. I just got an oil change and it cost me $74. I currently don't have a job in the average workforce and I do mutual aid because I have children that it would cost me more to work and put them into daycare than what I would make back. We added up all of the numbers from my husband's job. I have a degree in human services. It's not like I couldn't go out and get a decently paying job. In order for me to make it beneficial for me to enter the workforce, I would have to make a minimum of $25 an hour in order for me to balance out how much I would have to pay in childcare, after school care, transportation to and from, depending on what my work schedule was. And all of that is highly unrealistic for the average person, the regular person that works at your grocery store, the regular person that changes your oil, the regular person that takes care of your grandkids. And as somebody that worked in the field of childcare for over 10 years, I can tell you we make nothing. We make nothing. I worked in a daycare and I spent more buying supplies for my children in my daycare than I made in my paychecks. I worked in the schools for 3 years and watched teachers who make barely anything spend up to a third of their monthly salary on supplies for their classrooms. So if we're going to say that Nebraska supports our youth, which is where our real money comes from, there are real investment, it would be lovely to be able to see you guys support LB 318 and show us that you really do care. Because if you want to, you would.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Alec Gorinsky, AlecGorynski. I'm the president and CEO of the Lincoln Community Foundation, representing the Lincoln Community Foundation in the role of philanthropy, I'd say, in all of this. A number of years ago, the Lincoln Community Foundation started a project to better understand the socioeconomic condition of our community called Lincoln Vital Signs. And from that, we identified a handful of things that we and our partners in the community should prioritize. And of all the challenges our community faces, we identified two things, or a number of three or four things a number of years ago, but two of them as top priorities are early childhood education and workforce development, completely acknowledging that those two things, especially in this circumstance, are not mutually exclusive. I want to point out a couple of the Lincoln Vital Signs and an additional survey that a subsidiaries of ours did not too long ago to illustrate the challenge and why this is a priority of ours. As we know, Lincoln has a high labor force participation, low unemployment rate, 72% workforce participation rate, all of which are better than the national average. Something that isn't commonly talked about, but Elizabeth mentioned earlier, is the percentage of kids 0 to 6 who have both parents in the workforce. 77% in Lincoln. Comparable stat for the rest of the state of Nebraska. It's about 10 percentage points higher than the nation as a whole. So our parents, our families, our working parents largely rely on early childhood education to be able to work. In spite of this high workforce participation, our Lincoln families and similarly across the state continue to struggle. We have a 16% less purchasing power than the rest of the nation. We often talk about how we have a low cost of living, which is relatively true, but our per capita income is further below the national average than our cost of living. So it's driving down that purchasing power even further. So making matters worse then is the cost of early childhood education. According to Department of Health and Human Services Child Care Market Rate Survey, and then reported on Lincoln Vital Signs, our data project, in 2021, the average annual child care cost in Lancaster County ranged from $10,000 to $19,000 a year, depending on the age of the child and whether or not that care was provided in a center or family-based care. So, for example, an infant in a center would cost $19,000 a year. The overall average annual cost of child care in 2019 was $7,500, compared to the average in 2021 was $14,000. 87% increase in just 2 years. In all cases, the cost of childcare exceeds the cost of resident tuition at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. So something that people save their whole lives for. Providers, as mentioned before, have one primary expense, personnel costs, and one primary source of revenue, tuition from families. So to raise wages is to raise costs for families. Raising wages is probably inevitable at some point because as providers struggle to hire and retain employees, it's contributing to the capacity issues that we're also experiencing. A recent survey that I alluded to, 97% of centers have families on a wait list, largely because they don't have, while they have the physical capacity to support the demand, they don't have the employment capacity, and largely because of wages and benefits. So I share and all of these points are certainly, we represent the Lincoln Community Foundation and our data speaks to Lincoln, but certainly these are illustrative of a broader problem across the state. I share these with you for 3 reasons. Number one, working families, many of whom are just getting by, clearly rely on early childhood education in order to work. And childcare costs are at a point where work may become improbable. Families here in Lincoln would largely benefit from this to be able to work. Providers can't meet demands because of wages and lower workforce themselves, and to raise wages is to raise pressure on families. Providers and their employees would benefit from this, to answer your second question there, Senator Duncan. And then finally, as I mentioned, I kind of represent the function of philanthropy here. In Lincoln, we have seen how philanthropy and the private sector playing a role through philanthropic contributions can be a part of the solution. To address these challenges a number of years ago, we established Lincoln Littles, a strategic community priority. As a strategic community priority, this organization operates as an independent organization to address these complex challenges by working with the business community, the philanthropic community, and providers to address the issues in affordability. Through this, we've seen the role of philanthropy can play to directly subsidize the cost of early childhood education for families. What we're able to do in Lincoln, and a colleague of mine here in a moment will speak more to this specifically, is a drop in the bucket. And that would be largely grown because of the incentive offered by this particular bill, and is also illustrative of what's possible, the role of philanthropy, the role of the private sector in contributing to some of these solutions across the rest of the state. What we've done here in Lincoln has worked really well. So we encourage your support for LB 318. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Von Gillern, then Senator Breese.
Is it Gorinsky? Am I
Correct.
pronouncing that correctly? Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, you said that the capacity of the daycare centers is really driven by the number of employees. If I'm doing the math here right, if we're talking about a $3,200 increase for a full-time employee, that's like $1.60 an hour increase. Is that going to move the needle? I mean, I'll use a different correlation. We see teachers leaving the workforce, and certainly pay is part of the reason for that, but it's not the entire reason for that. Is this a big enough incentive to really change things?
Well, one answer to that question could be the incentives could certainly be larger. Oftentimes, the narrative we hear, and again, a colleague of mine can speak to this a little bit better, is that the options for employment are at fast food restaurants or at Taco Bell, like the other individual spoke to. And so those employees, because those are comparable wages, those employees wouldn't have this opportunity for this tax credit. So I think it would be an incentive to allow that person to make a different decision on a different place to work, because that's quite frankly the competition for employment. And I think, was that the extent of your question?
Yeah, but again, the economist in me, which is a very small piece, is just says that it has the potential to drive up wages elsewhere, which is what we've seen in the marketplace now. So we're kind of chasing. I fear that we're chasing our tail.
Yeah. Certainly. Again, I think that, the bottom of the wage barrel, if you will, I think there's a number of options for an employee to work. And so in the circumstances that we find ourselves in now, they could work at an early childhood education center, or they could work at a number of other places that are paying $11, $12, $13 an hour. And so if we can provide just enough incentive to keep an employee in an early childhood education facility, someone that decides that they do need to work, right? They need to continue to work. Our preference would be that they work in early childhood education so that they can, those centers can increase their capacity and get some of those kids off the
Yeah,
wait
some of
list.
those fast food restaurants are often college tuition credits too. So again, this is potentially a spiral that we're on. But anyway, thank you for answering my question.
Certainly.
Thank you, Senator Van Gillen. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairwoman Linehan, and thank you for your testimony here today. Kind of following up on Senator Von Gillen's question there, I think you did indicate that the limiting factor tends to be the workforce. As far as facilities and programs, most families, most kids have access to facilities and programs if the workforce was there,
I mean,
in your opinion?
No, I would say that the workforce would increase the capacity of the current number of facilities that we do have. But the current number of facilities that we have still isn't sufficient probably to serve the broader challenges. But the second tax credit that's been discussed here today would increase the ability of those existing facilities to serve the families that are currently waitlisted.
You're saying we still have a shortage of facilities in some places in the state?
In my opinion, correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Other questions? Senator Van Gillen.
Sorry, I have one
Yeah,
more
please.
question. And slide the economist over into me and get to the capitalist.
Sure.
If they're just talking sheer supply and demand,
Yeah.
do we have any sense of what if there is such a demand that exceeds the supply, we know that costs go up, prices go up. Do I have any idea what the profitability of some of these private daycare centers are? Are we enhancing the profitability of those centers? Or are we really giving them an incentive to grow and increase the service that they provide?
I don't have any numbers in front of me. I think the current system, the profitability is minimal. I think one of the testifiers alluded to that before. So the extent to which this enhances that profitability, I can't speak to that. I haven't studied that relationship yet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, sorry.
But you follow where I'm going with that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are probably, the system is what it is as we described
Right.
it. And so if there are other opportunities to enhance the system to make the economics a little bit better, I'm sure anybody here would be willing to listen to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Van Gillen. You mentioned in your testimony our salaries in Nebraska are lower than average.
Correct.
Can you, examples?
Median family income in Lincoln is around $65,000 a year. Median family income nationwide is, I don't know, probably anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 greater than that.
Is that because of wages?
It's because of wages. Yeah.
So it's cheaper to hire people in Nebraska than it is other places.
Sounds like that's the conclusion that we could draw for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
for being
you.
here.
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Brandt, ANNEBRANDT, and I'm the Executive Director of Lincoln Littles. Lincoln Littles was established in January of 2020 as the second phase of the early childhood portion of the Prosper Lincoln Agenda, which is a community initiative aimed at improving the lives of all Lincoln residents. Lincoln Little's mission is for all children in Lincoln to have access to high-quality care and education, regardless of race or income. Our strategy is to address affordability and quality, as well as inform the business and larger community about why investing in early childhood is good for the well-being of not only the children of this community, but our entire community. Today, I want to highlight the Lincoln Littles Tuition Assistance Program, which is our primary strategy to address affordability and accessibility issues for working families. Currently, we work with 28 child care providers here in Lincoln who participate in our quality rating system called Step Up to Quality. In addition, they must also be serving children on subsidy. In partnership with Lincoln Community Foundation, we raise money to then grant to the providers to help defray costs of care for families in the gap. And those families in the gap, the definition of that would be making too much for subsidy, but not enough to afford the high cost of quality care. Working families who income qualify at 80% of the median income or below are eligible. In the last 4 years, we've raised $3.1 million serving over 600 children in Lincoln. Average assistance per child is around $2,300 each, and we cap that funding, that grant funding, at $5,000 per child. A couple years ago, the mayor allocated city ARPA funding of $600,000 to Lincoln Littles because we had the infrastructure to get it back out through our tuition assistance program, and we knew that families were in a bind due to COVID, many reasons due to COVID. So we were easily able to get the money back out the door to children and families, demonstrating the need is much higher than one organization can fill. In fact, we weekly hear from moms and dads in need of assistance. Just a couple weeks ago, we got an email on a Saturday from a Lincoln Public Schools teacher contemplating leaving her position because she's recently single and can't afford the cost of care for her 3 young children. She was referred to Lincoln Littles by the Lincoln Public Schools social worker in hopes of receiving tuition assistance so she can remain employed. We also heard from a father with 5 children who had been sharing care duties with his ex-wife, and they were working different shifts so that they didn't need childcare. She was suddenly unable to care for the children during the day while he worked, and he was panicked and reached out to us. We were able to connect him with one of our partner providers who had tuition assistance still available that wasn't allocated to another child, and was able to enroll his 5 children into that center, and then temporarily use some of our funding while he was applying for subsidy. He later qualified for subsidy, but that was a relationship that we had in the community that we were able to help out for the time being until he could receive those subsidy funds. So weekly, we see examples of parents who need assistance to afford the costs of quality care. The purpose of this testimony is to share how a little bit of direct financial support for childcare expenses can keep parents in the workforce. The scale of the need in Lincoln is large, and it cannot be fully met by one program alone. The impact on how this program in Lincoln, impact of this program in Lincoln is illustrative of the benefit of supporting the cost of childcare via LB 318. We know the child care ecosystem is in need of long-term support, and our tuition assistance program is only a temporary solution. We also support the non-refundable tax credit for those contributing to childcare, as it will further encourage community support for early childhood and supporting working families. Until there is a permanent change in the way early childhood is funded, we need the whole community, and this tax credit is key to encouraging that support. Furthermore, we are also in support of the reauthorization of the school readiness tax credit. The child care workforce, as you've heard, is in crisis mode. Lincoln Littles in May conducted a survey to child care workforce here in Lincoln. We had a 30% return rate of child care directors who answered the questions on the survey. Of the 30% who responded, at that time, there were 168 jobs in child care open. Long-timers with incredible institutional knowledge are leaving the field entirely. You can make more money doing almost anything other than working in childcare. Lincoln Littles is doing what we can by hiring a full-time position to address wellness and workforce needs of the childcare ecosystem specifically, looking at ways to retain those that have stayed in the profession by looking at needs that they may have, while making $11 an hour typically, and also design ways to recruit more to the field. To some, a $1,500 tax credit may not seem like a big deal, but to low-wage earners, it's impactful. An example is a $1,500 credit.
I'm sorry, you have to wrap up.
Okay, I'm almost done. Example is $1,500 credit is $12 an hour for a $12 an hour person working. That's 125 hours of work. So reauthorizing the school readiness tax credit could serve as one way to retain staff and encourage quality through increased training and education, resulting in a higher tax credit. And finally, the childcare workforce is the workforce behind the larger workforce. Without them, the 77% of children under 6 whose parents work won't be able to. Thank you.
Are there questions from the committee? I have one. How many, in a child care center, how many adults need to be present for how many? 0 to
Children.
1?
Oh, 4.
4. And what?
I mean, 4 children to 1 adult.
Right.
Right.
And what, $1,200 a month for a baby? $1,500 a month?
I mean, the average that we have is 19,000. So I'm trying to, I don't remember exactly what the weekly is, but it's about 19,000 per child for an infant.
So it's at least 1,500.
Mm-hmm.
So that's $4,500, right? Somebody help me with my math here. $4,500.
What?
If you have 4 kids,
Oh,
4 babies, $1,500 a month times 4. No, it's,
6,000.
it's how much?
6,000.
$6,000. How can that not make money?
Well, that's one of the biggest questions we get whenever we do community presentations. And what I can tell you about that is that around 70 to 80% of your profits go directly to labor. So they aren't actually profits. They go directly to labor. So you have to have a lot. If you think about a classroom in a public school, you could maybe have 30 children in a classroom for 1 teacher. You just have to staff up with more staff based on how many children you have.
Right, I understand.
Well, so I'm just thinking like in a center, you might have 2 baby rooms. So you've got 2 teachers to each 4. And you've got the toddlers that have a little bit larger ratio. Then you've got the preschool. And that's just how the numbers land with the research that we've done.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, appreciate it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep.
Other proponents? Good afternoon.
Madam Chair, members of the Revenue Committee, my name is Dexter Schrodt, DEXTERSCHRODT, President and CEO of the Nebraska Independent Community Bankers. I'm not going to take too much more of your time today. Just wanted to express our support for LB 13. Community banks are bankers that live, reside, work in their communities, so they're invested in seeing their communities succeed and vice versa. It's quite the symbiotic relationship. And when I started in this position, it was made clear that outside, of course, the normal banking issues, that we start supporting economic development issues. And those 2 primary ones being, as you've already heard today, housing and childcare. So when we saw LB 13, our members reviewed it and found that it was a really solid idea to spur investment into childcare. Part of the prongs that Senator Duncan was talking about, the first one goes to people paying for childcare currently, the last one goes to workforce, but the second one is one that really piqued our interest because it's finally something that encourages investment into expanding childcare facilities, and particularly in our rural areas where most of our members are located. So just want to end that there. We think it's a pretty good idea to again spur that investment to increase the supply and hopefully lower the cost then once the workforce catches up. So
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? See none, thank you very much for being here. Are there other proponents? Any other proponents? Are there opponents? Any opponents? Is there anyone, wanting to testify in the neutral position? You have letters for the record, Senator Bostar. We'll find them. Or not.
We do have a lot of letters here.
Here, we got We have 16 proponents, no opponents, and 1 in neutral position.
Thank
Welcome
you,
back.
Chair Linehan and fellow members of the committee. An amendment is being distributed that was requested by the State Department of Health and Human Services. It's,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You have an amendment?
the amendment was requested by the State Department of Health and Human Services, simply to align language. It's not substantive to the policy in the bill. But I wanted to distribute that so that everyone could see it. Senator Von Gillern, you had a lot of really good questions. I think, whether you're, I'm trying to remember how you put it, whether the economist part of you or the capitalist part of you, I think what's important to keep in mind when we're talking about childcare is that for each additional childcare provider, whether that's a center, a facility, or an individual worker that can then expand capacity, that has a multiplier effect economically. We can only, if we want to grow our state, that means a lot of things, right? That means we want to grow our state economically. We want to physically grow our state. We want to be able to support families, and we want to be able to support individuals having families and being able to support families. And this does all of that, so that for each one of those people, can support, if it's a newborn or an infant, up to 4 more potentially families or individuals that can go into the workforce. And if it's older, if we're talking toddlers, right, the ratio is different. But it adds up, and these are the kind of things we need to be able to do in order to continue having the state move in the right direction, and particularly for single parents, right, where they don't have an option. They can't just not work, right? And because for families that for 2-parent household, one of the parents can absolutely stay at home with the kids, and I certainly applaud any family that decides to do that. And which is why also for families in poverty, we've made it so that they don't have to have a child in childcare in order to get some of the benefits of this. But for single parents, that isn't an option. And so right now, where a single parent is spending more than half of their income just on childcare, this is not a sustainable endeavor. It's not a sustainable situation that we're in. And, and Senator Linehan, you asked questions about, well, how is it not profitable? My son, so I currently have a son who will be 4 years old in March. And we had him at a childcare facility here in Lincoln that shut down. They had to close. And we were paying at least $2,000 a month for our one kid. And so, when I read the stats about how much money the workers are being paid, and I mean, they're essentially poverty wages themselves. I feel pretty comfortable concluding that there isn't profit being siphoned out of here by some entity, because if that was the case, with the amount of money I was paying in, they wouldn't have closed down if they were able to pull that off. So that's an anecdote to say that I really do think it's incredibly expensive to provide this service to the public and to do it well. And I think we're at a critical point, and I think it's important that we do what we can to advance this, especially in this committee. Would certainly, I think, appreciate that as we look to refresh our approach to education funding across the state in a lot of ways. I think it's critical that we don't leave early childhood education behind in that effort and in that conversation. So I would implore the committee to look favorably upon this legislation. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Senator Bostar, are there any questions to the committee? Senator Von Gillum.
Yeah, thank you for saying what, maybe you're reading my bubble, but applauding those that choose to stay home. And I'm not unsympathetic to this issue. My youngest son has sole custody of 2 kids, and they live in Virginia. Grandma and Grandpa can't drive over and watch the kids. He's been in training out of town all week long. He had to make arrangements for that. So I'm not unsympathetic to that. My oldest daughter has 2 kids, and she has chosen to stay home, and they live very modestly. They have 1 used vehicle, and I'm proud of the decision that they made. I'm not unsympathetic to it at all. My question around the capitalistic issue was, do we need to incent an industry that's already profitable? And I don't know that we can answer that. I'm not going to try and trap you into answering it or anybody else, because I don't know that it's an answerable question with the data that we have here today.
I would say from my personal experience and my interaction with the industry, it's an industry that's dying. And so I don't think there are great profits to be had here.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
And I think that what it contributes to us as a society is meaningful and impactful.
Mhm.
And agreed, parents who want to stay home, and we should have a system overall that if a parent wants to stay home and raise their children that way, we should be creating environments where that is easy to do. But for a parent who wants to work, right now we have disincentives in place. And see, that also seems misaligned. So we got to make sure that whatever the family structure is and whatever the preferences are, that we are able to create an environment and policy where we are encouraging the residents of Nebraska to fully maximize their potential here in our state.
So, and then just the purely mathematical question: do we need to incent households making between 75 and 150,000 and 150 to 200,000? How passionate are you about those top 2 tiers?
I'm certainly interested in having a conversation with the whole committee, which I'm sure we will do, to come to an agreed upon framework that I think everyone can feel good about. I would say that $150,000 in household income, that's still that's middle class, and it's expensive, right? I mean, $2,000 a month for each kid is a lot. And, if you have a few kids, it eats that money pretty fast. So, I'm willing to work with everybody.
Thank you.
To come up with the right figures. But I also think that there are arguments to be made for ensuring that we're fully encompassing the middle class in this support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillum. Senator Diane.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. You obviously heard some of my questions earlier, I'm guessing, regarding workforce, and that's kind of what I'm hung up on here. We've heard a lot of testimony in the last week or two about competition and a desire to sort of make Nebraska a place that's both retaining people who live here and recruiting other folks from out of state to come in. Do you know, or do you have any idea as to whether or not this is an incentive or a tax credit that exists in neighboring states, or does this sort of put us ahead in that respect? And to put it another way, do you think this is going to increase that recruitment in terms of increasing the workforce that we've had discussions about many times over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, that's a good question. And directly, it's a question that I don't know the answer to, but I will find out. But I'll say this. There's 2 possibilities. Either neighboring states have something similar to this or they don't. If they do, we're behind. If they don't, we can get ahead. I like it either way. And yes, I do think that this is the kind of thing that matters when it comes to how competitive we are. This is a piece of the puzzle that is important to families about where they decide to live, right? And we talk a lot about that in the Revenue Committee, and how easy it is to have a family and to support a family is, I think, for a lot of folks, that's the number one thing. So it's critical.
Thank you.
Senator Merman. Thank you, Senator Dunn. Senator
Yeah, I have some of the similar questions that Senator Van Gillen had. The child care tax credit, $1,000, $5,000, that only goes to families that have their children in child care?
So the $5,000 credit can go to families that do not have their children in childcare if they are at 100% of the poverty level or below. So in general, yes, you're right. It's specifically a tax credit to help cover child care expenses at a child care facility, except if the family is at 100% of the poverty level or below, they can claim the $5,000 credit regardless of whether or not their children are in a facility or they're at home with their parents. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so 100% of poverty level. Above that?
Above that, the child would be in a licensed care situation.
Okay, below that?
Below that, the child, it doesn't matter. The child can be at home with their parents. They would still get the money.
And above that, they won't get the money, above 100% of poverty.
Correct. If their child is not in a licensed facility, they would not be eligible for this tax credit.
Okay, so.
Above that level. That's correct.
So, and 100% poverty level was 100,000 for?
No,
No,
so
that was only 27,000.
for a family of four, I believe it was 27,000.
Okay. So above 27,000 for a family of four, they would have to have their children in a child care facility to get the credit.
To get this particular credit, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I have this fear of incentivizing families to put their children in child care rather than take care of them themselves. I realize below 27,000, they'd probably definitely need child care because they'd have to be working or both be working most likely, or single parent. I totally agree they need to have the support, but I just don't want to incentivize families to not take care of their own children.
Sure. No, of course. And I think so. I think that's a completely appropriate and valid position to have. I think the way I would try to ask you to think about it is that it's not an incentive for parents to have their children not be cared for at home. It's a tool for parents who want to work. I don't think that this bill will push kids out of the house. This is about aligning with what the parents want for their family. And the bill certainly doesn't do anything to make it harder for a parent to stay home with their kid. And in some cases, depending on income, it makes it easier. But I agree with you that we don't want to be removing kids from houses that's what their parents want.
Totally agree. It's necessary for low income, you debate where that'll be, or for single parents.
Sure.
But I have another question. The non-refundable tax credit, like the tiered system, so who does that tax credit go to? The people that donate to a fund?
The people who are contributing to effectively to fund childcare access.
Okay.
Yes.
So
and it's
where do the funds go that they contribute to that fund?
So it could go to a child. So they're not putting it into a fund. It would be direct contributions to a child care facility to help create one. And it's a 50% tax credit generally, and then or it can be up to 75%. If the child care services are in like a qualifying census tract. If the child care facility is caring for, subsidy enrolled children, which is part of the Nebraska DHHS. Nebraska Opportunity Zones.
So they would be contributing to a specific child care facility that
Sure.
qualifies.
Yes, they would.
Thank you.
They would.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Are there other questions on the committee? I have one. I'll try to make a question. Okay, if Senator Van Gillen's good at math here, there's some disconnect. I agree that I don't think if it was a profitable business, everybody'd be running to it, right? They're
Yes.
not. So it's not profitable. But there's some disconnect between paying $2,000 a month and the person that's taking care of the baby's getting $12 an hour. That doesn't add up to 80% salary. So is there somewhere where there is a profitable daycare that is succeeding that?
Well, they all wear Rolexes.
Yeah, well, no, but I'll show you these numbers. I don't want to, we need to get on to the next hearing, but
I understand what you're saying, though.
$6,000, 4 babies.
Yep.
Okay, and the woman and whoever's in the room getting $12 an hour. There's some disconnect.
If that.
Right, so what is it incredibly high, expensive insurance? Could be, I would assume. I just don't know.
I would be more than happy to speak with facilities directly and actually get a breakdown.
Yeah,
For
I
the
think we
committee.
need something because there could be something else here we're not seeing that's causing the expense and the lack of money getting to the employees. And I just would like some feel for what that is.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go to our next hearing.
And I have to run to a different hearing.
Okay. Adopt Child Tax Credit Act, LB 294. Welcome, Senator Conrad.
Hello. Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Danielle Conrad. It's Danielle, Conrad, Conrad. I'm here today representing the Fight in 46 Legislative District of North Lincoln. Also battling a little cold, so hopefully my friends on the Education Committee didn't pick that up like I did yesterday, or maybe it was my tiny turkeys at home that brought to share those terms with us. So Senator Linehan, members of the committee, thank you so much. I'm really excited to introduce LB 294 today. And I wanted, before I dive into the specifics, I just wanted to share a little bit of kind of how I came to start working on this measure and why I'm so excited about it. So as I was out on the campaign trail, knocking on all of those doors like we all do in that really meaningful experience, I just talked to family after family after family that was working really hard and finding it really more and more challenging to make ends meet, whether that was dealing with a pinch at the pump when gas prices were soaring, whether that was grappling with inflation when they were going to buy their groceries, or whether that was trying to manage the ever increasing costs of childcare. And so that experience kind of parallel to the experience that we have talking with stakeholders across the state and the political spectrum, kept coming to the clear conclusion that one of the key challenges we have in Nebraska is addressing workforce needs. And so looking at what we could do to address workforce, you start to kind of piece out the different solutions that are attendant there too, whether it's education, job training, transportation, childcare. These issues just kind of started to align what I was hearing from my constituents and what I was hearing from business leaders and stakeholders in Nebraska politics about some of the challenges that we're seeing on the statewide level for business and then for families. So I just started Googling around and researching to try and figure out if there was a better model that different states had out there to address some of these issues. So I quickly came across some resources on NCSL that talked about child
tax credits. And it had information about how different, how some of our different sister states had established child tax credit programs to help to address the needs for raising children, the needs of working families, the needs to address workforce. And then I started to learn more about how the child tax credit program had been expanded during COVID relief and pandemic relief. And I got to, kind of dig into some of that research to see how that policy choice was able to make a really positive difference for a lot of families and help to address child poverty in one of the most impactful and cost-effective ways possible. And so all roads kind of kept coming back to this child tax credit idea. And then, of course, watching carefully to see the position of our state finances, and with the full knowledge and wherewithal that, we would continue to see a robust debate from this committee and in the floor of the legislature about updating and modernizing our tax code to make sure that it worked for the most Nebraskans that we wanted it to work for and ensure our competitiveness. I thought, we got to put this chip on the table. We got to figure out if there is a way to start a conversation about this in Nebraska as part of that broader conversation we're having about workforce and about our revenue policy. And so I think that there's a lot to like about a child tax credit. I think it's very flexible to meet the needs of individual families as they see fit, whether it's educational costs, whether it's childcare, whether it's medical related issues or things of that nature. I developed the measure itself, kind of looking at different programs that were out there in our sister states. And if you look at the states that have developed a child tax credit, they're across the country and across the political spectrum. Some red states, some blue states, and I think that we have some really good lessons there. But I also want to just bring my personal experience to this. As a mom with 2 young kids, I know very well how expensive childcare can be. And we've been very blessed in our family that we have resources and we have family close by to help us to, carry out the obligations that come with the joy of starting and raising a family. But I can also tell you, having resources and having family, it's still really hard. It's still really hard to find access to good childcare. And it's still really hard to figure out how to make the budget line up at the end of the day. I remember talking to my dad as we were scouting out childcare options when we had our first child. And he said, I heard childcare costs as much as a college education. And I said, gosh, I wish. It's actually more expensive than that. And especially in Nebraska, we're a little bit more expensive than some of our sister states in that regard. And you don't get a student loan for it if you were to qualify otherwise. So, I mean, just to kind of put an example on the table in that regard. But I just jump into a little bit about the specifics of the legislation, and then I'm happy to answer questions. And I know that there's some policy experts here, and there's also some impacted families here that are going to share some of their experience and ideas as well. I do think that this measure has the opportunity for very broad support across the state and across the political spectrum, and I'm really excited to present it to revenue today. So the Child Care Tax Credit Act would provide a full $1,000 per dependent child for families with income up to about $75,000 for single filers, $92,500 for head of household, and $110 for married filing jointly taxpayers. Families above these incomes can still receive the credit at a reduced rate of 5% for each $1,000, $1,500 for head of household, and $2,000 for married filing jointly. Dollars above the maximum allowable income. The credit is fully phased out at incomes reaching $95,000 for a single taxpayer, $122,500 for head of household, and $150,000 for married filing joint taxpayers. It's estimated that this proposal as written would benefit about 470,000 children, or put another way, about 81% of all children in the state of Nebraska. This proposal is also estimated to help out about their parents, about 896,000 individuals in the state, or about 46% of all Nebraskans. The child tax credit, excuse me just a second, is a proven way to help Nebraska families manage through our current high rates of inflation. Given our state's healthy fiscal condition, I think the time is right to enact a policy that provides needed support to hundreds of thousands of children and Nebraska residents. This tax credit would help hardworking Nebraska families afford necessities like food, childcare, utilities, clothing, and rent. It would also put more money in the pockets of hardworking Nebraskans, thus increasing their local purchasing power and their ability to contribute and stimulate our local economies. The 9 states that have adopted a child tax credit include California, Colorado, Idaho, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Mexico, New York, and Oklahoma. Additionally, I understand that the governor of Montana is also proposing a $1,600 tax credit for every child in their state under the age of 6. Again, the people following us can help us go deeper on the numbers and the policy and their lived experiences, but I'm planning to stay and answer questions in closing. Also happy to answer questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Senator Conrad. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Dunn.
Thank you, Chair Linehan, and thank you, Senator Conrad, for bringing this. And I don't want to ask too many questions if other people are going to answer it as well. But one of the things that you talked about early on was that you did some research, obviously, and saw the impact that we see from this kind of tax credit. Can you just expand a little bit more on what some of the, not specifics, but the overarching sort of broad benefits we're seeing when these are implemented, whether federally or at a statewide level? More specifically, vaguely, I know that these have led to families getting out of poverty. We're seeing an even more impactful sort of progression of people getting out of poverty from marginalized populations. So broadly speaking, what kind of impact can we expect to see from this if it is implemented?
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator. And definitely there are people behind me that will answer more depthly and brilliantly. But I can tell you what really resonated with me when I was starting to Google around and do that independent research was that there was some very compelling reports and data analysis from how the federal COVID relief dollars worked for expanding the child tax credit. And what we saw, what really jumped out at me was how we were able to see one of the most effective investments at reducing child poverty in our nation's history. We really have such clear data and analysis to carry forward from that COVID experience that shows that policies like this really made a difference. When you look at the statistics, and then of course, when you talk anecdotally to people, it mirrors what we're seeing in the data. So really, just seeing those data points really caught my eye, really resonated with me. And, I started my career working as a public interest attorney and have always centered kitchen table economic issues, economic justice issues in the course of my work. And so to see those kinds of numbers come out from the child tax credit, those impacts, it was remarkable. It was unlike other studies and data analyses I had seen in regards to other programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dunn. Are there other questions from the committee?
Okay.
Seeing that, I have
Yes,
one.
please.
So did you look at all about, trying to hold these things together in my head, you got childcare, but
Yeah.
as you know, once they get into school, that gets less, hopefully.
Yes.
Right. So did you think about maybe just doing it for children who were 8 and under?
Thank
Because
you.
18 is kind of like.
Maybe a little bit older, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. And I wanted to put into place at the get-go kind of a broad program design idea, just to get some more information about how that might work in Nebraska and to see what the costs might be. I would be absolutely willing to work with the committee to tailor the program if we decided to move forward either with differences in terms of the income eligibility or the age eligibility.
The fiscal note's big.
The fiscal
I
note.
understand all the reasons,
Yes.
and I've read the studies too.
Yes.
And it's impressive.
Yes,
It's very
exactly.
impressive. But they were huge tax.
They were.
I mean, and it didn't matter how much you paid. It's like, I
Right.
got children who got those. It's like Christmas. So
Right.
I just wondered if you'd be.
Yeah, I'm absolutely willing to work with the committee on that. Absolutely, 100%. I think that, one thing I like about this approach, and I got to hear a little bit of Senator Bostar's bill introduction and closing as well, which is just kind of another solution to address some of the similar issues, is that this is a bit more broader and comprehensive because it doesn't necessarily impact only folks who have kids in childcare, right? It might impact those families that are taking care of their kids at home, but still incurring more expenses that come with children. I think the last statistics I saw demonstrated that it's about $300,000 per child to raise a kid from birth to 18. And so, there's a lot of families that are struggling through that. And of course, the more children you have, the more expensive it is along the way. Maybe you could get some economies of scale, but so that's one thing that I liked about this is a potential solution, that it was a little bit more comprehensive in addressing whatever individual family's needs might be. And those needs might be different, but I would be 100% happy to help you in terms of working on it. One thing that we identified after we reviewed the fiscal note, for example, is if you dig into that, and they did a really nice job, like they always do, kind of laying things out, you can see the first year is much more expensive than the years projected forward. So if we wanted to address that, for example, I think a very simple amendment just basically could address kind of the relevant time period that the program would be established for. The first year, in terms of how it was introduced, covers about a 17-month period instead of about a year period. So that would be one way to bring down the initial year's cost very quickly. If that was something that the committee was interested in, making it fit within the larger budgetary package or revenue package. The other thing is it is expensive, but when we look, I think, compared to some of the other price tags that we'll be seeing coming through this committee or as part of the overall budgetary picture in general, I'm not sure we'll find a better bang for our buck in terms of stimulating the economy and supporting families. So it definitely, I think, should be a part of the conversation.
Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, the first proponent. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Diane Amdor, Dianeamdor, and I'm the staff attorney for the Economic Justice Program at Nebraska Appleseed. Nebraska Appleseed is a nonprofit law and policy organization that works for justice and opportunity for all Nebraskans. We'd like to thank Senator Conrad for introducing this important bill. Nebraska Appleseed supports LB 294 because this state-level child tax credit, which is modeled on the federal child tax credit expansion from 2021 and has been tailored to fit Nebraska, would reduce child poverty and would benefit everyone in our state. The research based on U.S. Census Bureau data from 2021 is clear and it is impressive. That the expanded child tax credit and other federal measures taken in response to the pandemic uplifted millions of people from poverty. The child poverty rate, as measured by the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM, was cut nearly in half, from 9.7% in 2020 to 5.2% in 2021. For Black children, that number dropped from 17.2% to 8.3%. For American Indian and Alaska Native children, that number dropped from 15.2% to 7.4%. For Hispanic children, that number dropped from 14.7% to 8.4%. For white children, that number dropped from 8.4% to 4.5%. In 2021, the Supplemental Poverty Measure for all races and all ages was 7.8%, which is the lowest the SPM poverty rate has been since those numbers were first published. There's no better way to invest the current revenue surplus than to give these funds back to Nebraska's children. This bill would invest in our future, our children. Implementing a state-level child tax credit is a wise investment that may even result in lower costs in the long term. A cost-benefit analysis published last year found that making the federal child tax credit expansion permanent would cost a lot, approximately $97 billion per year at the federal level, but would generate social benefits with a net value of $982 billion per year. These benefits include improved health of children and parents, increased future earnings, and future tax payments of those children. The study also considered reductions in public expenditures on healthcare, foster care, and of particular interest in Nebraska, given the overpopulation crisis in our state prisons, criminal justice. Children, particularly low-income children, deserve a tax credit just as much as our ag producers and businesses. The benefit of LB 294, as compared to some of the other important tax credit proposals in front of this committee this year, is that it's not tied to a specific purpose. It's simple to administer, and it gives the decision-making power back to the taxpayers to decide how their money is spent, whether that is to offset the costs of school tuition or childcare, or their property taxes, or I already said childcare expenses, or if they need to spend it on basic necessities like food, rent, and clothes, which is what the research shows the majority of people spent the federal expanded credit on. This bill is about helping children. It is about helping all of Nebraska's children. And it is about respecting parents and guardians as the experts when it comes to knowing what their children need. We appreciate your attention to this issue and encourage the committee to advance LB 294.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairperson Linehan, and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Cindy Meyer, spelled CINDYMEYER, and I'm testifying in support of LB 294 because I think that this bill is a positive step to providing tax relief to Nebraskans that I often hear our state leaders say is a priority. I live in Omaha with my husband and our 2 children. Currently, I'm a full-time student and I'm employed as a work study through my university. When I first heard about this bill, as I often do when I hear about something that's interesting and important, I shared it with my husband. What surprised me, and something that has never happened before, is that while chatting with our tax preparer, he shared the information on this bill. I have never heard him share this type of information with anyone, especially a stranger. I think that this shows how important this bill is. This is something that people are talking about and something that people are interested in. This bill is a positive step in helping the children of our state have their needs met. The federal extended child tax credit helped my family, and I know that it helped many others as well. I would like to share an example of how the federal extended child tax credit helped my family in 2021 and how this bill would help families like mine. Having the child tax credit helped me purchase school supplies for my children. In the fall of 2021, my youngest daughter started kindergarten. We had moved that summer, so that meant that my kids would have to attend a new school. Although I expected the need to purchase school supplies, I was in shock when I saw the amount of supplies that were needed. The school that they had previously attended had provided most of the supplies, so I had not anticipated needing to purchase things such as 2 pairs of headphones. But I did not panic, as I might have in the past, because of the additional tax credit funds. As this was a new school for both my kindergartner and her then 2nd grade sister, it was especially important that they had everything they needed to feel confident and to be prepared to learn. The child tax credit proposed by LB 294 would take the stress out of purchasing new clothes for my kids. An extra $1,000 means that when one of the kids goes through a growth spurt, as kids tend to do, going shopping for clothes is a fun experience instead of a stressful experience. In 2021, I was not only able to get everything on 2 separate school supply lists, but I was also able to get a first day of school outfit for them. In the past month, I began to notice that the pant legs on my 9-year-old are looking a little shorter. I keep telling her that next paycheck we'll go shopping. And as of yet, we still haven't made our shopping trip. I can't help but think how if this bill were already in place, we would be having fun finding new clothes together. Thank you for your time and for your consideration, and I hope that you will advance LB 294.
Thank you very much for being here. See if there are any questions from the committee. No, see me. Were those both school districts in Nebraska, or did you move
Yes.
here? Okay. Okay, well, I won't embarrass the schools by asking you. Okay. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon.
Chairs are always shorter than I think.
Pardon?
These chairs are always shorter than I think.
Well, I don't know.
I'm glad that's going to be on the record.
During the day, I really think during the day they get turned and they go down.
Yeah, well, maybe a morning here and we'll try it out.
Yeah, it's higher in the morning.
Yeah. Happy that it'll all be on the record. Chairperson Lenahan
Yes.
and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Erin Feichtinger, ErinFeichtinger, and I'm the Policy Director for the Women's Fund of Omaha. We believe that economic security is foundational for achieving gender equity, and for this reason, we offer our support for LB 294, which will help families achieve both long-term stability and help them to weather unforeseen economic crises like school supplies that we were not anticipating. Low-income families, particularly those headed by single mothers, as well as Black and Latino families, are disproportionately impacted by economic crises and labor market volatility. What would be perhaps a minor inconvenience in the economic circumstances of a family with means can and does quickly spiral into an economic crisis for low-income families. For these families, an unexpected expense, such as repairing a car so that they can get to work, can mean hard decisions about whether to buy food or pay for rent. The effect of these extreme fluctuations in a low-income household's budget is especially acute for children who, as a result, can experience worse educational and health outcomes, as well as reduced future earning potential. Providing for a child tax credit as proposed by LB 294 helps moms and kids. The child tax credit program of 2021, as Diane so wonderfully laid out before, have kept about 3.7 million children out of poverty and reduced the monthly child poverty rate by 29%. Surveys show that low-income families in that program overwhelmingly use their tax credit payments on necessities such as food, rent, clothing, and utilities. The economic security of women and families is critical to our future success as a state. In Nebraska, 188,003 households are headed by single women, and 34,394 of those households have children under the age of 18. Nearly 1/3 of all households headed by single women that have children under 18 are below the poverty level. When parents can care for their kids' basic needs and do fun things like take them shopping for a first day of school outfit, my daughter only wears sparkles, so we're always searching for that. Children benefit from that economic security. The child tax credit should not be seen as a handout, but rather as an investment in Nebraska's future generations. If we truly care about Nebraska's children, I think we are morally obligated to help their families provide for those basic needs. When children do well, all of us do better. And I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Linehan, and thank you for being here today. One of the things we've heard about from other testifiers, as well as Senator Conrad, is there are obviously these economic benefits that we can see that are traceable, that are trackable. It seems to me that providing this tax credit could also have the benefit of like intangible benefits. And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit in your testimony, the security, the safety that goes into that. Can you expand a little bit more as to how that's going to support both kids and parents beyond just what's recordable in the economic sense, and what other kind of intangible benefits we might see by providing them with this?
Yeah, so study after study, particularly or specifically with children who are living in poverty, who are living in economic insecurity, shows that instability, right? The moving, maybe because you got evicted, the food insecurity, And just, I think too, that psychological stress of knowing that, and this has been studied with the child tax credit as well, that psychological stress of knowing that your parents are stressed and worried, all contribute to those things that we want kids to really be able to do, like pay attention in school. I used to teach 5th grade special ed in Chicago public schools, so very easy. And that was something that we always learned about, right? Is when we had kids who were coming from unstable households, like economically unstable households, the first thing we needed to do was to make sure that their basic needs were met when they came into the classroom. And that's one of those, I think, intangible benefits. It's much easier for a kid to learn math, to get engaged when they're not worried about, their parents being stressed, or if they're going to have a home to go home to that night. And so something even just that little of that breathing room, I think, for parents really ends up benefiting kids. And I'm sure that there are people who are much smarter than me behind me who would be able to help elucidate that even further.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Senator Nyan. Are there other questions from the committee? So on your numbers here, which are very helpful, so the last paragraph on the first page, 34 out of the 24.5% and 34,394 of these households have children under 18.
Mm-hmm.
And a third of those households are headed by single women that have children under 18.
Yeah.
So it's a third of the 34,000.
It's a lot of threes in there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get down it. So if my math's right, that's like 11,465 families, single mom, who are living in poverty.
That sounds right.
Okay, and when you say poverty, you're talking about 100% of poverty level, right?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Other questions, Ms. Thank you very much for being here. Other proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Chairwoman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Garrett Swanson. That's spelled GARRETSWANSON. And I'm here on behalf of the Holland Children's Movement in support of LB 294. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which was signed into law in March of 2021, increased the child tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000 per child aged 6 to 17, and $3,600 for children under 6. To measure the effects of this legislation, the Census Bureau reviewed the legislation in its annual supplemental poverty measure research paper. This paper found that in total, the child tax credit lifted 2.9 after implementation of the child tax credit, 2.9 million children were lifted out of poverty. And according to that research, the 2021 expansion of the child tax credit accounted for 2.1 million of these 2.9 million children lifted above the poverty line, a massive success in fighting child poverty in the United States. Additionally, the expansion of the child tax credit was found to positively impact children's health, education, and long-term life outcomes. By providing families with more financial stability and resources, the credit helped improve children's access to healthy food, stable housing, quality childcare, and other essentials that are important for a child's development. Senators, unfortunately, that expansion has sunsetted, leaving millions of children that have been lifted out of poverty in the dark. Thankfully, we have an amazing opportunity here to support children in Nebraska. Over the last several weeks, members of this legislative body have been having great conversations about what can be done to keep young people in Nebraska. I know a lot of people are going to throw numbers at you, so I want to get a little bit more personal. So speaking as an uncle to 5 children here in Nebraska, I've had in-depth conversations with my family and what can be done to best support them. An increase in the child tax credit is a popular proposal amongst my family members and for all families raising children here in our great state that I've had the fortune to talk to. As a newly married man that one day soon may be starting my own family, this legislation would be a strong incentive for my wife and I to start that family here in Nebraska. This is truly a proposal that can help us get one step ahead of our neighboring states when it comes to retaining talent and building prosperity for working families. And we applaud Senator Conrad for proposing it. The Holland Children's Movement strongly urges this committee to vote this bill out to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Appreciate it.
Are there other proponents?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairperson Lenahan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Anahi Salazar, ANAHI-SALAZAR, and I am representing Voices for Children in Nebraska. Our state benefits when every child in Nebraska has the opportunity to reach their full potential. The Child Tax Credit, or CTC, helps low-income working families by offsetting part of the cost of child rearing. This tax credit would help families with children escape poverty and achieve self-sufficiency. Nebraska, like most of the country, has faced growing child poverty rates since the end of the federal rescue plan, and households are having to pay more each month compared to last year because of inflation. Voices for Children supports LB 294 because it supports Nebraska's working households and children. Child tax credits are an effective means to bring working families needed economic relief. Poverty fell by more than 40% across the country with the federal child tax credit expansion. The money helped decrease the child poverty rate. That was 5.2%, below that of the adults for the first time. With the federal CTC expansion, households were able to provide for their children by paying for food, utility bills, housing, clothing, and cover education costs. And the Census Bureau provided real-time data on how parents were spending the monthly deposits and what it meant for children. And food topped the list. As a result, Nebraska's poverty rate for children in 2021 was 12.2%, the lowest since the data has been collected. By instituting a state-level child tax credit, LB 294 would help maintain and hopefully push our child poverty rate even lower. Additional income, such as the child tax credit, can improve children's health, educational, and economic outcomes. Families with young children also have the cost of childcare. Childcare annual costs in 2020 averaged about $11,000. LB 294 would provide additional support to families with young children requiring childcare to remain in the workforce. Finally, there is a growing body of evidence that shows a relationship between family income and academic achievement. Increases in tax credits for working families have been shown to positively impact educational outcomes. This impact extends beyond the economic. Additional research found that income from policies such as the child tax credit improve the health, educational achievement, future earnings, and lifelong prospects of children. Enacting a state-level child tax credit will help Nebraska children flourish. We thank Senator Conrad for her leadership on this issue, and we respectfully urge the committee to advance this bill. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there questions from the committee? Where did so you say $11,000, so I guess you have a footnote. I just need to read the footnote.
Yes, and that was in 2020. I think when they were with the bill before, they
More recent numbers.
Yes, they had more recent numbers.
And this is average from not just the tiny of kids, probably up to 8 or 9 or something.
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, are there any other, one other thing, when you said that the federal, that's gone away, right?
Right, yes.
Right, so we won't be able to make up, because that was like $3,000.
Right,
And then
right.
2,000, okay.
Yes, but we saw how impactful it was, and hopefully bringing or helping families, supporting families with an additional tax credit now would help aid in that, in lowering that child poverty.
Thank you. Other questions? See none, thank you very much for being here. Next proponent.
Remember my glasses.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairperson Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Alicia Christensen, ALICIACHRISTENSEN, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Together, where our mission is to end hunger and homelessness in the Omaha area. We support LB 294 because infusions of cash income like the child tax credit play a critical role in economic stabilization for families at all income levels, but are especially significant to the people that we work with every day.
Services from community organizations like Together and government programs provide crucial support for many Nebraskans, but they are most effective when paired with direct financial assistance like the child tax credit. For the most part, programs and services provide specific benefits addressing foreseeable household needs, but they don't have the flexibility to address unexpected expenses. However, 40% of adults report that they would have difficulty or be unable to pay an unanticipated $400 expense. And Together's case managers often work with participants whose food insecurity or homelessness can be traced back to a temporary cut in work hours, a bill that they didn't expect, or a similar circumstance that upended a budget that had no room for error. For these families, a tax credit provided by LB 294 would fill this gap, allowing them to cover short-term decreases in income, unexpected but necessary costs, and do so before the problem snowballed and became a crisis. Opponents of cash assistance frequently voice concerns that families will spend such assistance, direct assistance, frivolously, or can often attribute financial instability to poor life choices or an unwillingness to work hard. But these objections are contrary to our experiences as service providers and dozens of studies that provide evidence of the time and effort low-income households put into careful budgeting, and that the majority of recipients' income is devoted to necessities like food, rent, and healthcare. LB 294 respects the competency and autonomy of Nebraska families, recognizing that parents are in the best position to know their household needs and how best to meet them. What's more, as many of those who have gone before me have mentioned, we know that this works. It's enormously effective in addressing poverty among families with children. Though it's perhaps obvious, research shows that poverty has an incredibly negative effect on children that can last into adulthood. Child tax credit programs ensure kids can flourish by providing the financial resources to meet their basic needs. As a result of the federal child tax credit expansion in 2021, the number of children experiencing poverty decreased by 46%, and families experienced improved nutrition, decreased reliance on credit cards and other high-risk financial services, and made long-term educational investments for both parents and children. In short, the child tax credit is an effective approach to proactively address financial instability and avoid costly reactive responses to downstream effects of that instability. I ask that the committee advance LB 294 to help Nebraskan families and children thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there any questions for the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. Tom Benzer, Nebraska Catholic Conference, TOMVENZOR. My testimony being handed out is basically it's the same one from the previous bill, because what you saw in Senator Bostar's bill in micro that we had supported there, it's kind of the same concept here, had a more macro level. So I won't repeat what's on the testimony, but just kind of wanted to get in on the record and just kind of reiterate. For us at the conference, one of the key things here that we think this policy is doing is just kind of giving that preference and that favor to the family and to the family structure. So making sure that we have tax and economic policies that are favoring the family, so that, like I said in my earlier testimony, that we can, ease some of those burdens of raising children, especially in large families. But also, we think this bill as well, LB 294, offers that preferential option for the poor that we think is very important at the Catholic Conference. Again, making sure that in our public policies, we have a particular care and a love and sort of an attention to the poor and the situation that they're in. And then just finally, I wanted to mention, as we're making kind of a push this year in the legislature to just kind of have more robust pro-life laws on the books. We're also just reiterating to our legislators just really the importance of making sure that we're focusing on the family supports that we're offering, so that those families, in saying yes to life, have those various supports that they need to be able to say yes to life, and to do that with sort of that joy and a lot of with the ease of the burdens that you've heard already talked about today. So, but just wanted to identify those few kind of key principles on that and urge your support for some element of this, although I know the fiscal note is also very big on it. So, but thank you very much and happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other proponents?
Good afternoon, Senator Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Matt Erb, M-A-T-T-E-R-B. I'm an 11-year educator with Lincoln Public Schools, and I am speaking on behalf of the Nebraska State Education Association in support of LB 294. As an elementary music teacher, I have the amazing opportunity to work with all of the K through 5 students in my building. 850 unique 5-year-olds through 12-year-olds who come to school each day from different neighborhoods, socioeconomic levels, and cultures. In order for those students to achieve their highest potential, academically, artistically, and socially, there are needs that first need to be met. Financial stress trickles down to the youngest members of our society, who are least able to control their situation. When even a little bit of that financial stress can be reduced, it makes a noticeable difference in a child's life. A child tax credit is a strategic and egalitarian way to help reduce child poverty and to allow parents to provide the necessities like food, rent, childcare, or piano lessons. LB 294 is a way to provide tangible support to children and families in rural and urban areas alike. Thank you for your consideration. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for being here. Could you spell your name?
Matt, M-A-T-T-E-R-B.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Thank you very much for being here. Other proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Linehan, members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Rebecca Firestone, R-E-B-E-C-C-A-F-I-R-E-S-T-O-N-E. I'm here today representing Open Sky Policy Institute to testify in support of LB 294 because there's a robust body of evidence about the effectiveness of child tax credits. Our finances allow us at this time to make this transformational investment in our kids, and the credit would affect many Nebraska families in positive ways. I'm not going to reiterate some of the evidence that's been shown about the effectiveness of the credit on the federal level, but I'm happy to talk about more in questions. During questions, I will note that there is substantial momentum across the country, across the political spectrum, to consider investing in state-level child tax credits at this time, including the governor of Montana incorporating it into the Montana budget proposal this year. At this point in time, Nebraska's current finances also present an opportunity to enact this proposal this year. We believe LB 294 would be a wise investment to use the state's current surplus, as it would grant meaningful tax savings to working families. And the way that the credit is designed, it reaches a broad range of families across the income distribution. So our modeling suggests that an average tax reduction for taxpayers in the lowest quintile of the income distribution, about $1,283. At the top quintile, there's a tax reduction that's estimated at $993. So the modeling that suggests that it reaches about 81% of kids in the state suggests that it reaches a broad range of families, and we think that provides evidence that this could be that this is a tax credit that could support families, and it also provides a lot of flexibility for them in terms of how they manage the expenses that they have for their children. And with that, I will wrap up my comments, and I'm happy to talk more during questions if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dunham.
Thank you, Chair Linehan, and thank you for your testimony here, Ms. Firestone. So I think obviously it's worth noting that I think Open Skies come in opposition to tax credits previously, or at least maybe that's been a position that's been taken. Genuinely curious, what is different about this particular tax credit that you're more in support of this? Why would you think that this is maybe going to work better than some of the other tax credits that have been proposed?
So this is a tax credit that has really robust evidence around its effects. And in the realm of economic and social policy, you don't often see such a close, like practically causal relationship between a particular policy proposal and its economic effects. And there's very good data on the federal level about the effects of the expanded tax credit. So I think what sort of put us into a position of being willing to support this particular tax credit is that there's evidence about the effectiveness, and there's an economic multiplier, which I think has been discussed. So the estimates that we've seen is that $1 of this tax credit on the federal level would lead to about $1.25 worth of economic activity more broadly. So there's pretty robust return on investment for this type of credit that supports economic activity. So with that, that led us to be willing to support this credit. I believe there's also a provision in the bill that asks the Department of Revenue to be able to report out on who's actually claiming the credit. So that also provides some transparency to all of us in the state to understand how this credit is actually operating.
And so have you had a chance to review the fiscal note on this yet?
I have.
So the fiscal note doesn't encapsulate some of that potential growth that you're going to see moving forward, that $1.25 for every dollar.
I mean, that's the cost to the state. It doesn't encapsulate the full amount of economic activity that the credit could generate.
And to be fair, we don't know what that actually would be. But
No, on a state level, we can't model it at this point in time. The evidence that we have is how the federal credit works.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Senator Diane. Senator Breezy, did I see?
Yeah, I guess briefly. Thank you. And thanks for your testimony here today. Are you very knowledgeable about the programs in other states, the 9 other states? Example, how they compare to this proposal as far as the ages being targeted, the amount of the credit, the income cutoffs, things of that sort?
I can speak to some of those now, and I think we can map those out in some more detail for you. There's a variety of different design considerations to think about in terms of a child tax credit, and different states do it differently. So there's the amount of the tax credit, there's the income thresholds at which the credit potentially cuts off. Some states do it as a percentage of the federal credit. So there's a variety of different considerations to work through. I mean, our understanding is that this particular credit, with the thinking that Senator Conrad put into it, was about sort of trying to develop sort of a broad-based approach for Nebraska that would reach families across the income distribution.
As far as the income levels targeted there for the cutoff, do you know how those numbers were arrived at?
Yes, those were based on pre-TCJA income thresholds at the federal level.
Thresholds
That was for married filing jointly, for head of household, and for single
the federal
filers.
credit.
Excuse me?
For the federal credit?
Yes, it was based on what those were at pre-TCJA, because TCJA sort of changed the thresholds around a fair amount. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one brief question.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Breezy. Senator Diane.
I apologize. I promise I won't ask too many more. I realize this may be more about the next bill we're going to talk about, but I just remembered we're going to be talking about the EITC moving forward. What's the interplay between this tax credit and the EITC, and how would one maybe affect the other? Genuinely, I'm not entirely sure, and I may be belying my ignorance, but how would those two things interact with one another currently?
That's a really interesting question, Senator. And I have to say, I haven't thought about it extensively. And I think that I would say that this is a more broadly based credit than the EITC, which is going to be targeted to folks at the lower ends of the income distribution. And there is some potential possibly for, if both of these provisions were to go through, for some families to be able to claim both, but I would want to actually confirm that.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Diane. Are there any other questions for the committee? Do you have any idea on your, I think the word quartiles? So how many, I wrote it down, sorry. How many of the lower 25% are paying income taxes now?
I don't have that number on top of me right now. This is designed to be a fully refundable credit, so it would reach some portion of people who are, because of their income thresholds, are not currently paying taxes.
Right, but it's the same as the federal.
Yeah.
I understand. I just didn't know what it'd be interesting to see the distribution of how much goes to the lowest 25 and up to 50, 75 and 100.
Okay, I'm fairly certain that I can get those numbers to you. I'm happy to share that with you.
That would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you so much.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Is there anyone wanting to testify in the neutral position? Senator Conrad, let me find the letters. Not that my staff doesn't give them. We have 53 proponents, 0 opponents, and 0 neutral.
Well, I'm glad the record reflects that. That never happens with my bills. Thank you.
Oh, I think a lot of people are busy.
I think you're right. I think you're
I'm
right.
getting emails from, or text about, whoa.
Yes,
On
I
this
think
one,
you're
this
right.
morning.
Yeah. Briefly, thank you so much to all the testifiers who did make time to share expertise and experiences today. Thanks also to the folks who wrote in. Thanks to the committee for their rapt attention and important questions. You know, one point that I just want to put a little bit more emphasis on, which I think is really important in thinking about this policy proposal, is that, you know, this would be a proposal that of course helps low-income families, help to make ends meet with rising costs on the home front, but it's also broader than that in as designed and as introduced to really help to address the needs of a lot of families that are making too much for public assistance programs, but maybe you know, we're still having a lot of those challenges with making ends meet at home. And so it's really designed to not only be an effective anti-poverty tool, but to really help to ease the burden for middle-class working Nebraskans as well, which I think is something that I know the constituents I talked to in the last year were very interested in kind of thinking through and learning more about, because I think you've probably heard some of the same things where middle-class folks really feel like they're being left out. They feel like there's a lot of attention for, you know, families in need that are struggling with a lot of our public assistance programs and things of that nature. And they feel like there's a lot of, you know, attention to provide tax relief to some of our highest earners who have, of course, a different tax burden for different reasons. But I think that one thing that we should think about very carefully, whether it's through Senator Bostar's proposal, Senator DeBoer's proposal, or something like this, we need to figure out a way how to address the needs of middle-income Nebraskans, of hardworking Nebraskans who are kind of right in the middle there. And I think that that would go a long way to putting together a package that would meet the needs of our constituents and be politically more feasible.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? With that, to bring the hearing on LB
Very good.
294 to close. Thank you very much, Senator Conrad. And do we need a 5-minute break?
I'm fine with that. It's up to the committee's preference.
Is there an S? Oh, you're the next. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You have me. Okay. All right. We'll open the hearing. I might leave for 5 minutes. My trusty vice chair is here. Increase the earned income tax credit. Okay, LB 295.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Danielle Conrad. It's D-A-N-I-E-L-L-E, Conrad, C-O-N-R-A-D. Here today representing North Lincoln's Fighting 46 Legislative District, and I'm excited to introduce LB 295 to the committee. So this will be familiar terrain for returning members of the committee and perhaps something already familiar to new members of the committee. This is a measure to increase the earned income tax credit from the state level. So Nebraska and many of our sister states have developed state-level earned income tax credits over the period of years. Ours has been in place for some time and has been unadjusted, I think, since 2007. So what this measure would do, our current EITC is tied to the federal program and sits at about 10%. This would move it up to 17%. And you might say, why 17%? That seems like such an arbitrary number. We can definitely go into more details about it, but it's really pegged to where our sister states are, where our neighbors are in our region, to be thoughtful about that competitiveness that I know is an important part of our tax policy discussions. EITC is, again, I think one of those programs that finds a very broad base of support across the political spectrum and across the state geographically. This has been an issue close to my heart. I've had a chance to work on it before I joined the legislature with my predecessor, Senator Landis. And then in my prior term of service, I helped to establish and continue the work forward on the EITC, and much of the same reasons controlled today as they did then when we first established it. We have a healthy fiscal position. We need to make sure that all Nebraskans have an opportunity to benefit from that. The EITC makes work pay. It rewards hard work. It rewards people who are trying to do the right thing and play by the rules. And a slightly expanded credit would help to ensure that those families who rely on EITC, who are a bit more targeted low income than in the last bill that we saw here, really can make that work pay and really help to address increasing costs at the pump, with childcare, buying groceries, what have you. So I think it's a fairly modest but meaningful investment when you look at what an expansion from 10 to 17% might mean for our state's overall financial picture. And it's important to keep in mind that by increasing the state EITC to this level at 17%, you know, that helps about 14,000 filers in Nebraska, or 14% of filers in Nebraska are low-income workers, which is about 100,000 Nebraskans. I passed out a chart so that you can see kind of where the current program is, kind of what that would mean for different family compositions if this measure were to be advanced. And I'm just going to triple check that I covered everything in my opening. But I'm, of course, happy to answer questions of the committee, and I know that there will be thoughtful testifiers behind me as well.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Senator Von Gillum.
Senator Conrad, thank you. You said the 17% is to match neighboring states. Are those the states on our perimeter? Are they peripheral? Are they all? Is that the rate where they all are, or approximately?
Yeah, I think it's perhaps an average. I can grab those numbers for you and bring them up on my closing.
I didn't expect you to have it on top of your head, but
I should probably know if I
presume
should be a little bit sharper. But yeah, I think if you look at kind of where Colorado and Kansas and Iowa are, this would help us to be a little bit closer to our neighboring states in regards to how they treat their EITC program.
Okay. And then second, one of your comments was that it rewards hard work, and this is going to sound sarcastic. I don't mean it that way at all. I'm looking at the numbers here. I see you get more credit for more kids. I don't see that you get more credit for more income. Is there for a greater input to the state? Am I missing something in the calculation?
Sure. So I think probably both are true, and it's not sarcastic at all. So the EITC is designed to have kind of different eligibility dependent upon your income and your family size. So EITC does provide some very modest benefits to families that are low income and working that don't have children, for example. But then you would see an increase as people work their way as their family size increases, for example. And you would see on the flip side of that, Senator Von Gilleren, you would see as people work their way out of poverty or up the economic ladder, then they would, they'd have less ability to benefit from the EITC.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. Questions for the rest of the committee? Here's one that I expect you to have it, Senator Conrad, now, but if you would, maybe for your closing or tomorrow or whatever.
Yes.
Is there a cliff effect if you get to, okay, you're married filing jointly, you're at 59,000. Let's say you have 2 children, let's say with families of 4, that would be good, we just all stay with family of 4. Is there, when is it like, I don't want the raise, and I know this is probably rare, but it can happen. I want the raise because if I get the raise, I lose the credit.
Right. Yes, I think Senator Linehan, you're exactly right. It kind of ties into eligibility and utilization for other public benefit programs, work support programs. You hear about this whenever you take up a SNAP bill or a housing bill or a child care subsidy bill that people, are trying to work their way out of poverty and then they hit that extra 25.
There's a wall where you lose free and reduced lunch, you lose CHIP, you lose.
You got it.
Earned income tax credit. So I just want to make sure we don't build a wall.
Yes.
And then I too will piggyback on Senator Von Gillen's. I'd like to know the surrounding states, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, South Dakota, Wyoming, their ECT, but also their top tax rate. Because I think they all have a lower top tax rate than we do.
I think that's right. And I did just see on my chicken scratch notes here that I am reading. Iowa's at 15% today. Kansas is at 17% today. And Colorado is at 25% today. I understand that the Missouri program is fairly new and is at 10%, similar to what our measure has been at since I think about 2007-ish or so. And I'll triple check Senator Linehan, but I think South Dakota and Wyoming don't have income tax, and so I don't think they have the EITC, but I will get the top effective tax rates for the other.
But they may have something.
They might have something like that, yeah.
So, and it also has to measure against the top rate and when at what income levels.
Yes, I will check.
Okay, all right. Other questions for me? Seeing none, thank you very much. And then we'll have proponents.
Gotcha.
We meet again so soon.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Vice Chair Von Gillern, members of the Revenue Committee. Again, my name is Erin Feichtinger, ERINFEICHTINGER, and I'm the Policy Director for the Women's Fund of Omaha. We're here to offer our support for LB 295 because the Earned Income Tax Credit has proven one of the most effective measures to reduce poverty for working mothers and their families. The EITC helps families at every stage of life through improved infant and maternal health, better school performance, greater college enrollment, increased work and earnings for the next generation, as well as increased Social Security retirement benefits. The EITC is particularly beneficial for working mothers who, as a result of this tax credit, experience higher wage growth and job stability than women who did not receive the EITC. That benefit translates to their children, the next generation of Nebraskans who, as a result of their working parents receiving the EITC, are more likely to attend college, work, and earn more as adults, as well as avoid the early onset of those health issues that we associate with child poverty, to go back to what we talked about in LB 294. There is a tendency to believe that anti-poverty measures are inherently government handouts. In order to claim this credit, as Senator Conrad pointed out, the recipient must have earnings from a job. Single working mothers are the group most likely to be eligible for the EITC because they are most likely to be low income and have qualifying children. And as these mothers work more, they earn more and they receive more benefit. There is perhaps not a more clear example of the hand up, not a handout, but a hand up approach than the EITC. When the EITC was expanded in the 1990s, researchers found this expansion actually more effective at encouraging work among single mothers than any welfare reform. Furthermore, it has proven to significantly reduce caseloads for cash welfare. So that same EITC expansion of the 1990s was found to have moved more than 500,000 families from welfare assistance to work. So when it comes to reducing poverty for low-income mothers and their families, this legislature has made it clear that it wants to increase employment, encourage work, and drastically reduce reliance on cash welfare and government assistance. Providing for the Earned Income Tax Credit accomplishes all of these goals and helps to grow the health and stability of the next generation of Nebraskans. So we would respectfully encourage this committee to advance LB 295 out of committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can and to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Von Gillerin and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Tom Venzer, Tomvenzor, Executive Director of the Nebraska Catholic Conference. And this is my third revenue bill of the day, so I feel like I belong to like an economic think tank or something. But looks like I've got a typo already, I can see. But LB 295 enhances a proven, effective, and socially just public policy that assists families often overlooked when fiscal policies are considered. The Earned Income Tax Credit, as stated by the IRS, is an income tax credit which helps low to moderate income workers and families get a tax break. As you've heard already, the EITC is not welfare, but it makes welfare policies more effective in terms of both economic and social costs. This legislation has at least 4 positive impacts. It assists the working poor, delivering critical income support for workers and low-wage jobs. It supports the stability of their families, helping to lift their children out of poverty. It promotes self-sufficiency, which remains the linchpin of Nebraska's welfare reform enacted in 1994, and it helps to reduce long-term welfare dependence. When the legislature worked on welfare reform in the mid-90s, engaging in a great deal of diligent debate, one of the commitments made on behalf of the state was to provide supportive policies to help make self-sufficiency realistic and meaningful. Authorizing an increase in the EITC at a realistic and meaningful level, as it does in LB 295, is a manifestation of that commitment and would be an important step forward for Nebraskans experiencing poverty. The Catholic Conference has been a longtime supporter of the EITC legislation here in Nebraska, and this support is an extension of the support that the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has consistently acted upon at the federal level for enactment, implementation, and promotion of the federal EITC. So we respectfully urge your support for LB 295 and ask you to advance it to general file, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none,
All right.
thank you for being here again, Mr. Venzer.
You bet. Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Von Gillerin and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Matt Erb, Matterb. I'm an 11-year educator with Lincoln Public Schools, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Nebraska State Education Association in support of LB 295. An increase in the earned income tax credit would be advantageous to teachers in their day-to-day finances and most working families in our state. Children in families receiving the EITC score higher on tests and are likelier to graduate from high school, enroll in college, and earn more when they enter the workforce. The money returned to families in the form of EITC expands economic security to those families, while also supporting the local economy as those funds are used for necessities like groceries, transportation, medical expenses, rent, and utilities. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for being here. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Breese, did you just, oh, you didn't, I'm sorry. I'm seeing things. I'm sorry, I just walked in, but what did you say about do better with scores?
Yeah, children and families receiving the EITC score higher on tests and are likelier to graduate from high school, enroll in college, and earn money when they enter the workforce, earn more money.
Can you give me the statistics that say that?
I can look into that for you, absolutely.
Yeah, just so, because that would be very helpful information to have. Okay,
certainly.
Thank you very much for being. Other proponents?
It's good to be back. Good afternoon to the Revenue Committee. Thank you for hearing a different version of my testimony. I'm Alicia Christensen, ALICIA, CHRISTENSEN, and I am the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Together, which provides supports and services for those facing hunger and homelessness in the Omaha area. We strongly support LB
295 because it will enhance the earned income tax credit, which is one of the most effective anti-poverty work programs for working households. And while primarily focused on providing additional income and promoting employment for low-income workers, Nebraskans at all income levels enjoy the positive effects of the economic boost that the earned income tax credit provides. This program encourages workforce participation because a worker's tax credit grows with each additional dollar of earnings. The EITC also bolsters local businesses. For every tax credit dollar earned, about $2 is spent in the community, as workers primarily use tax credit funds for things like rent, groceries, utilities, and healthcare. The EITC improves health and well-being for Nebraska families, increasing access to prenatal care, decreasing premature and low birth weight infants, improving children's school performance, and expanding rates of high school graduation and college enrollment. The EITC is a source of economic security for many households. Without this cushion, unexpected expenses may become a financial crisis, resulting in homelessness or prolonged poverty. Based on our experience assisting Nebraskans facing homelessness and housing insecurity, I can tell you it's far more expensive to exit homelessness than it is to prevent it in the first place. But of course, these benefits don't show up in your fiscal note, which is impossible to do, but there are benefits that beyond the balance sheet that you see when a bill is introduced, of course. In short, LB 295 would enhance a program that already provides benefits to state residents of all income levels. And it would be particularly significant for low-income households and families experiencing poverty that we work with each day. Thus, I ask the committee to support advancement of LB 295 to enhance this effective and widely beneficial tax credit. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions from the committee? I see where this part of this Roxy Keynes, it's in your footnote, and 6 is center on budget and policy priorities. Is that a national? Okay.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, are you a rather new group together?
No, we have been around since the Together was created in the wake of the 1976 hurricane, tornado in Omaha.
Okay.
And
you're new to me. That's all, but you've been around a while. All right, thank you very much.
Of course.
Anybody else? Thank you much for being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Diane Amdor, D-I-A-N-E A-M-D-O-R, and I'm the staff attorney for the Economic Justice Program at Nebraska Appleseed. Nebraska Appleseed supports LB 295 for the same reasons that we supported LB 951 last session. I will not read my entire testimony because it's almost exactly the same thing as we said last year on LB 951. So sorry, anyone reading this transcript, please see LB 951 from 2022 and other bills from many years before that that I could read into the record, but I'm not going to. One thing I will pull out, the third paragraph there, I believe there's a question on what other states and which of our neighbors have enacted, increased their EITCs recently. Both Colorado and Missouri boosted their EITCs in 2021, and Oklahoma as well. Had cut their credit in 2016. They restored the credit's full value last year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Proponents?
Good afternoon, Chairman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee, Rebecca Firestone, REBECCA, FIRESTONE with Open Sky Policy Institute. We're testifying here today in support of LB 295 since it is an evidence-based effective tax credit that yields economic impacts that would be beneficial for working families in Nebraska. In 2018, the EITC brought 5.6 million people out of poverty, including 3 million children. Specifically in Nebraska, some evidence suggests that about 14% or a little over 100,000 of all taxpayers filed for the EITC in 2019. And among the districts represented on the Revenue Committee, between 5% to 20% of these districts have taxpayers that are claiming the credit. So there are Nebraskans who are currently using the federal credit to a substantial amount. Additional research finds that the EITC benefits local economies with an economic multiplier effect that's about 1-to-1. So for every dollar spent in the EITC credit, it generates a little bit more than $1 of economic activity. As other proponents have noted, it's designed to reward work, and a robust evidence base indicates that the EITC has beneficial effects for children's health, parents' mental and physical health, children's future earnings, children's educational attainment, and receipt of the EITC is associated with reductions in the rate of low birth weight, likelihood of child abuse, reductions in the likelihood of child abuse and neglect, and involvement in child protective services. Further, senators would note that there was a question about a fiscal cliff effect and would just suggest a potential amendment to address those concerns might be like an income phase out at the higher levels of at which the credit can be claimed so that you can avoid that fiscal cliff effect.
Okay.
And with that, I'm happy to my comments and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there proponents? Are there any opponents? Is there anyone want to testify in the neutral position? Letters, we have 9 proponents, 1 opponent, 1 neutral for LB 225. We'll go back to Senator Conrad.
I know, I thought twice about whether or not I wanted to press my luck, if I wanted to get back in the chair and be subjected to questioning. But I just wanted to thank the committee for their attention and the testifiers who came out here today. Definitely be willing to work with the committee if they on an amendment to address cliff effect or other program design features, if they decide to move the measure forward. And Senator Linehan, you'll know from your long service in this committee, these ideas, similar ideas have been brought forward year after year after year after year. The hearings go very similar to how they went today, with a significant amount of support and very little to, if any, opposition from Nebraska stakeholders. So then for a variety of reasons, the measures just haven't had an opportunity to move as part of broader packages. So I'm hopeful that maybe this is the right year to get some of these ideas moving and updated and a part of our overall revenue policy. The other thing that I wanted to note, like in addition to the EITC in particular, as a baby lawyer, I was working on a local campaign in Lincoln to adopt a living wage ordinance. And I was kind of part of the pro group, and then I was frequently on the speaking circuit with some business representatives who disagreed with that policy approach. And so we would go around town and have these really interesting public forums kind of talking about how those issues might impact Lincoln voters. And it was so cool because during the course of that, not only did I have a chance to really develop deep relationships with some business leaders in Lincoln, even though we disagreed on that measure, but we found out that we actually agreed on the EITC, that it was a very effective policy tool to address poverty and make work pay. And that experience has always really carried forward when I've taken up EITC policy, because I just think it's a great Nebraska story, and it shows that we can find common ground, even if we, have disagreements on other aspects of about how to address solutions in our state. And the last piece I'll leave you with is I'm so glad that Tom Benzer came forward on behalf of the Catholic Conference today. And he absolutely was very clear in his advocacy. But one thing that I do want you to keep in mind, because it will be a big part of our debate in the upcoming session, is that in a post-Roe world, more and more states are looking to expand and strengthen their safety net for families and for children. And the child tax credit and the EITC has been a part of those discussions in other states. So I think the time is right to revisit this in Nebraska. And maybe we aren't going to be able to see eye to eye on some of those other hot button issues, but maybe we can find some common ground here to do a lot of good for a lot of people.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Are you going to prioritize?
I'm sorry.
Priorities?
These would be right at the top of the list. Yes, I was joking with the speaker the other day. I said if I prioritize a revisor bill, it may not move the chair. No, in all seriousness, definitely at the top of the list, especially the child tax credit piece. I think that would be very, very exciting to be a part of.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we draw the hearing on LB 295 to a close. Thank you.